Welcome back.
We're back here for the show again.
It's a nice little night outside. The weather's a little crisp.
It's just creepy as shit. It's like some late AM talk radio. So it's a cool 73 degrees right now in Salt Lake City. If you happen to be outside, just take a chance to look up at the moon there for a minute. Just enjoy the sight. I'm going to put that on there, though.
Yeah, you should, dude.
Hold on.
What about just for the intro?
No, we'll do the intro and then you open it up like that.
What?
Yeah.
What's the intro? All right.
Well, we'll do a.
We're already recording.
Announce on the intro, because I wanted to get people to vote for us on Utah's best of state.
Hell yeah. All right, go ahead.
Oh, we're doing the intro now?
I guess.
What episode are we on?
That's a good question.
29, right?
I think it's 432.
Okay, episode 432. Brought to you by
2-3.
Alpha Counseling. Alpha Counseling is the largest and most respected provider for justice-involved clients in need of sexual offense-specific treatment services. Alpha has a A+ rating for the Better Business Bureau and was recently voted number 2 in the Standard Examiner's 2018 Reader's Choice Awards for mental health and substance use treatment services, as well as top-rated local award for 2018, number 2 for therapist psychiatrists in Utah. So for those of you paying attention to this podcast, we'd really appreciate it if you would vote for us for the best of state for 2019. We're really looking forward to that.
Where can they do that? How do they do that?
Man, I should probably have a website ready, right? But who needs honestly, if you hear websites on a podcast, you think anybody doesn't go straight to Google and just type in exactly what they heard? I
make sure I get the URL exactly as stated on the commercial, so it's really valuable information for me.
Right, you're just HTTPS colon
backslash.
Right. So just I would imagine you just Google best of state, and if you can't figure it out, I don't want your vote, son.
Yeah.
That's not true. We still want it.
I'm kidding. One way or another, you figure it out. It's a pretty intuitive website. Please vote for us.
What website, though?
Best of State website. Why are you...
Google.
Google. It's Google.com, Playboy.
GeoCities.
It's on GeoCities. That's my website, dude. It's cool.
It's on Netscape.
Has a song in the background when you go to it. All right.
Okay, what are we talking about tonight? Guilt and shame?
Guilt and or shames.
Guilt and shame
Episode
and values.
29, it looks like.
Oh, episode 29. 432 was way off.
We got over... Oh, we went over a while back. 20,000 downloads, though.
Oh, nice.
We're at 21,000, dude. We're taking over.
All right.
We're taking over.
Taking over?
For Social Work Podcasts in Ogden.
I love Joe. We are the number 1 rated social work podcast in all of Ogden.
There's one.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get into it. Guilt and shame.
All right, so we apologize. Dude, these stink. I like it, though.
Let me get you my wife beater.
We'll just go with it.
Okay.
We got gym socks over our microphones today because I forgot the little covers that make it not so breathy.
Yeah.
Into it. So if there's
Dude, I seriously I mean, don't get me wrong. I love hearing myself talk, but that last one that we listened to, I got maybe 10 minutes deep, and I was like, man, all these breaths. And when somebody says the P word, just any, it sounds like a firecracker going off. Man, good audio equipment's essential for these damn things.
Yeah,
so sorry folks. But these socks will do. Hell, we are in Ogden.
I'm probably going to pass out from
When in Rome.
Jeff's gym sock. Yeah. It's pretty good.
Yeah, really. What is in? Have you ever analyzed your sweat, like ginger sweat?
I don't know. What do you think would be in it, man?
I think if you sent that, if you put droplets of sweat into one of those 23andMe things,
yeah,
they just send you back the sign of the devil. We just send a bomb to your house.
Get rid of it.
Yeah, 23andMe shuts down the next day.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen to your face there talking that close to one of my socks.
I'm getting nauseous.
You
Dude,
should,
you want me to
dude.
grab you something
I
better?
don't know what to do.
No, have you ever
Talking. I'll grab you something better.
Have you ever looked at his laptop? Just his laptop. Dude, I think his sweat is eating his keyboard. Look at it. Look at that thing. That's
I saw
hideous.
His last one, it was like eating through
Like,
the keyboard.
I wonder if you no.
Why is there dirt?
First of all, are you doing sessions in the desert, bro? Like,
It's a desert set.
I love you take that into PC laptops and you're like, my keyboard disintegrated. I don't think that's gonna cover it, bro.
I like watching. Now I got to
Oh,
is this
man.
been worn, this tank top? All right.
That's pretty clean.
Because it smells like that sock. No, this one's better.
All
Tank
right.
top is definitely, it smells like pine.
You guys are making me ashamed of my
Are
gingivitis.
you guilty about it? Or
Yeah.
just,
Well, you shouldn't be. So this is something that's what's actually kind of true about shame is you can't change that about yourself. You can't change the fact that you're a rotten, dirty, no good, blood-sucking, soulless ginger. You can't change
I
that
know.
about yourself.
But you could change the fact that you're a narcissistic, self-absorbed megalomaniac, and you don't.
I don't
Yeah,
think
but
we could change that.
The funny thing is he said all those things like they were bad, like as if those are insults.
Well, clearly not.
Yeah, that's right, Playboy.
Speaking of, have you watched that documentary yet on Netflix about Ted Bundy?
Oh no,
Oh
no,
yeah,
no,
that's awesome,
dude.
I didn't know he escaped twice.
Why is he? Why is he?
three times?
Was it 3 times?
It was 3 times.
Dude, why is he my favorite serial killer? Like, I don't know.
There's just something about it.
Well, the thing is I don't know. I don't mean to say it like that. Like, I mean, serial killers are bad. I get it. Thanks, Dad. But what I'm saying is, he's just awesome. Like, I mean, if you listen to Charles Manson's story, I mean, like, he just got a bunch of bums high on freaking acid all the time, and they listen to him. Like, that's not. I could do that today.
I don't know if awesome is the word.
Awesome's the word, bro.
No, Ted Bundy was a
you-
dirtbag.
Okay, but you're saying awesome like is in it is it's got to be positive. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that.
How do you define awesome?
Well, again, too, it's like Jeffrey Dahmer. He got just dudes to come over who were probably ugly anyway, and then ate them. Right? Like that's. I mean,
happens every
there's
day.
like Ted Bundy. There's a charisma there. There was like some manipulative.
There was something weird
There was
with
something about that guy that just separated him from all the rest of them. You know what I mean? The only other one that I compare him to, and it's kind of different because the times were different, was H.H. Holmes, because that dude
He was that doctor, right?
yeah, he was that doctor, and it was kind of the World's Fair, but I mean, nobody investigated anything back then.
Same thing with LL Bean.
What about
LL Bean.
LL Cool J?
LL Bean is LL Cool J's brother.
No, I agree with you. There's something about Ted Bundy that was just
Well,
in a morbid, like appealing way. You just wanted to, like, I always just want to know more about him.
I love
We
it
were
when
little kids when he got executed, and I remember being scared of him when I was growing up. I didn't realize that I was kind of not really in his victim profile at the time. I was scared of him and Saddam Hussein. Remember, and I'm
Well,
like
you're good
8 or
now,
9.
then. You're safe.
I know, yeah, no more fear. But yeah, but Bundy, he always kind of has lurked in the back of my head as someone compelling. Again, I don't know about awesome though. He's a colossal asshole.
Dude, awesome doesn't necessarily have a positive context to it. I'm just saying he was just different than all the rest of them.
Kind of the way that
yeah,
Genghis
that's true.
Khan's awesome.
Well, yeah, kind of the way
Fair
that
enough.
Genghis Khan is
All
awesome.
right,
I mean, like, I'm not saying like, oh yeah, I admire him.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that. I mean, because like you compare him to dudes like H.H. Holmes. Those were back in the day murders, like the most prolific serial killer of all time. I'm like, bro, that shit happened in the 1800s. Like,
Yeah.
there was no law enforcement back then. You killed like 1,000 people. People were like, so. Like that's it. That's as much investigation as there was. You know,
What was really weird is, I don't know if you guys have watched it, but it's just because it wasn't technically that long ago, but the huge disconnect between law enforcement because there was no internet. So like they had that guy, he was in Florida and just wouldn't give him his name.
Yeah.
And so they just couldn't find out who he was. We're like, that wouldn't fly today. They would immediately know who you are. They
only-
were holding on to him for days or like a week or something. He was just wouldn't give him the name.
The only
So
other
they
one
knew
that
who it
was like on that level, although he didn't have as many murders, and I don't know if that makes you like higher status or something, was like the Zodiac killer. But with him, he just talked a bunch of crap. Like, I mean, there wasn't a ton of other like murderers who were like actively talking crap to the police through the newspaper and writing all these like, intricate things. And he was never caught too. I mean, there's just, so I'm not saying again, everybody's fascinated by murderers. I'm not like sicko. I mean, I haven't even watched those things yet because you guys have watched
Pretty
them.
good. It's good.
Well, I just wanted to clarify because, you're not that different
Than Ted Bundy?
Than Ted Bundy. Save for the fact that I can't prove you haven't killed anybody.
He murdered
but, yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that you're drawing a clear line of distinction.
Well, so here's the difference, my friend, is an antisocial would screw himself over at the expense of another person because they just don't really care that much.
I think you're also that.
A narcissist would not ever put himself at peril at the expense of another person.
But you're both, though.
No, friend. No.
Dude,
and if I am, I'd get away with it, Playboy. I've watched enough Forensic Files to know how to do that all the way around.
That's true.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know. Need to get caught nowadays. There's too much. We aren't talking about this, though. What are we talking about?
We're talking about Law and Order.
Guilt and shame.
We're Law and Order SVU. Yeah. Yeah. Guilt and shame and sex offender treatment. So basically, when we bring this topic up, it's an important topic to a lot of clients because I guess old school or antiquated type of interventions have you can call them shame-based. I don't know how necessarily to define that other than exactly what it sounds like is I'm doing a lot of interventions to bestow shame onto a person. So one of the things we're going to talk about is the difference between shame and guilt today. For those of you who don't know, there is a really distinct difference, and help you guys kind of recognize the destructive effects of shame. Also, what can we do to learn to cope with shame, and then learn to use guilt in kind of a healthy manner and link that with our values. So our values are something that is important that should guide our behaviors. So that's when we bring this topic up. This has a whole lot to do with managing my emotions, but also who I choose to spend my time with in terms of how they're, defining characteristics about me. So, right? That's about right.
Yeah. Well, and I was just going to say, just to provide some context, and you guys can weigh in here, but maybe if we talked just briefly about why traditional or maybe more antiquated treatment programs would drive up the shame. And early on in my career, that was sort of the way that it was done. And the idea was that these guys come equipped with all of these psychological defenses that absolve themselves of responsibility, and therefore to cut through all that stuff, you have to break them down and hold them accountable and even overemphasize it by making them say the most extreme version of whatever their offense was, so that they would, be made to use words like force, even when there wasn't necessarily force in the way that we define it. Also, it wouldn't be uncommon for a therapist to call a client a monster. It wouldn't be uncommon for a therapist to have a client stand in the middle of a group room and to basically levy a firing squad such that all the people in the group would basically get bonus points for finding some way to tear down what the guy in the hot seat was in terms of the way he was describing his offense. And again, I think the idea was you have to break them down and then build them back up again. And I think that statement has actually been said by several of our clients that have maybe been subject to that, is that they've actually been told by therapists from that old school that the idea is to break them down and cut through all the psychological defenses and manipulations that allowed them to cover up and justify what they did. So I think that's my understanding of the intention behind the old way. Is there anything that you guys have seen with that?
Well, how does that then, so let me ask you a question on that. So how does that then translate into less likely to reoffend?
Well, I think the idea is that accountability was the hallmark for sex offender treatment. The idea being that until you fully acknowledged what it is that you did, you can't really make any steps forward in treatment. And then with empathy, a big focus was on victim impact. The idea being that you have to get the offender to see just how catastrophic their actions were on their victim and how much of a dirtbag they were for putting their victim through that. And only then, once they understand that, will they be less likely to do it again. I believe.
Okay.
That's the idea.
Well, fair enough, but I disagree with both of those principles.
You understand I'm not backing it, right?
I understand that. Okay. I mean, I think anybody who's thinking that just, I mean, you get to have an opinion on this, but I'm just not sure if that's the right approach because, okay, so the accountability piece, here's my problem with the accountability piece. What I want is accuracy when I want a client to be accountable and responsible for their behaviors. And I want them to be responsible for what they did, not for anything beyond that, right? Mm-hmm. So I think, yes, responsibility for that is important, and I can be patient with that, but I want an accurate statement. So to me, I mean, if you're trying to tell me, if you're telling me that, okay, if I describe my offense and maybe it's lesser than what you expected, so for example, if I say, well, I was intoxicated and, I didn't pay much attention to this girl. She was attractive. She told me she was 19. I believed her. We went and had intercourse. I didn't know much about her. It was a really impulsive decision. I really should have thought about it. Come to find out, she was only 15. Okay, you can make speculations on that I'm full of shit, that I should have known her age, all the rest of that. That's fine. But and in this case, we talk about, was the victim cooperative with this, or were they, and not consenting? So we kind of make a distinguishing there. So if they are cooperative, all right. So if you tell me then, nope, you can't say it that way. The only thing you can say is you groomed this girl and you raped this girl, and then you tried to cover it up or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the only narrative that I can give you that you'll accept as my treatment provider.
Yes.
One of two things are going to happen. I'm just going to tell you that, or I'm not, right? In either case, I don't know if I ever come to believe that, though. I might look at that rationally and say, well, I'll get kicked out of this program if I don't tell them that way. So I'm just going to tell them that way, and maybe I'll try to shed a tear or two when it's happening, but I'm not really going to believe what I'm telling you, because in my mind I know what happened, right? And I have my own language to describe that. And I think accountability, like the language, is important at times, but overemphasizing what happened, I don't think that does anybody any good, because it's if I'm overemphasizing what I did, that's just as bad as underemphasizing. I'm still not getting to the accurate truth as to what I need to focus on to avoid that from happening again. That's just my opinion on accountability. I don't think you can go, another direction with that.
Well, yeah. So the success of that style then would be that you get a bunch of dudes really good at parroting back a canned statement, a template of
it's essentially a permission slip to manipulate me.
Right.
It's a permission slip to lie to me.
This is literally what I want to hear. Okay, your turn. Go. Tell me what I want to hear. So, but that is kind of how it was.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know, Justin. Don't you kind of see these guys like coming into our program a lot of the times, and it's almost like they have their own language. Like it's like they have this it's like prison talk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that, and also you can tell people that have been through the ringer therapy wise, because I was just starting a new group and doing the whole like kind of getting to know you, like what's a typical week look like, what are you looking to get out of group? And some guys are like, just, oh yeah, I just want to learn more about myself. It feels like it's a pretty honest answer. And you'll get the one guy who's like, and I don't blame him, but you get the one guy who's like, I really would like to find more insight to my cycle and find healthy ways to cope with, I'm like, dude, what do you really?
It's just a robotic
that's
answer.
The whole thing on that. My thought is, okay, what do you really want to get out of the group though? Like, he's just learned what he has to parrot in order to get through. And I think that's the exact thing, knowing if me going home or getting out of here depends on me just saying something that makes you feel good.
Yeah.
I like the glazed over look in your eyes you got when you're imitating that dude.
That's what it totally sounds like.
Far away, 1,000-yard stare.
Yeah, it's like and they say it with no emotion. Or I want to learn more about my offense, so I go on have empathy and compassion.
Not exactly genuine.
Well, the second piece to your question, Jeff, is for, I guess, that approach, that empathy piece. I mean, we've talked about this a few different times, and I know we have podcast that's going to be focused in the future exclusively on empathy, but I mean, I really think that anybody who thinks about empathy really needs to just look it up in a dictionary. I mean, just look it up, okay? And especially if you're going through, read through a motivational interviewing book just once, and they'll talk about empathy in a lot of ways. It's all about neutrality. It has nothing to do with empathy is a guarantee that that's going to stop something. And I get the premise. Like, if I would have known the harm that I was causing or long-term causes that I could harm, then I likely would have stopped. But again, you're kind of counting on that dude to give a shit about that person. Not to mention, too, the other thing is if I'm accurately assessing empathy with a person, and I think sometimes about like an easy talk about that is like if you think about some of those attractive teachers that have offended on high school boys, right? And how many guys, maybe even in this room right now, were thinking to themselves, well, where was that teacher when I was 16 years old, right? So if we're accurate in our empathy for those kids, they were digging what was going on, right? Now, never mind the fact that maybe when they're in their mid-20s or 30s or whatever, their views on sex and sexuality may be all messed up. I get that. What I'm saying is at that moment, if the offender was trying to pay attention to how that person felt and imagine what it felt like from their worldview, empathy wouldn't have stopped them. Empathy would have encouraged it more at that point. Because if you're asking me to say, okay, I'm not going to do something to this person because of something that may happen to them in the future, that's not empathy. That is statistical compassion is what you're asking me for. So you're asking me to pay attention to things that may happen to this person based on all the other people it's happened to, and it's more likely than not that it's going to happen, and because of that, you want me to have compassion. Okay, that's fine. Then teach it appropriately. I'm going to teach you about statistical compassion, and even then, you're counting on somebody to give a shit. If you're asking me to motivate my behaviors or lack thereof on the potential consequences to somebody outside of me that is in the future, like that is so far removed from me, like there's hardly any self-interest in that whatsoever. And I mean, it's not really, self-interest isn't a bad thing. If, I mean, those people were looking out for themselves, they wouldn't have done those things because they ended up in prison, right? So, I mean, I get where they're coming from. I know they're trying to say, yeah, you should feel more for this other person. But unfortunately, some people don't. Like, they just don't. And sometimes for good reasons, too. Like, if you think about... Jeff doesn't watch it, but you've watched Game of Thrones, right?
Kind of.
You don't what? You haven't watched Game of Thrones?
Half an episode, I think.
Oh, my God.
About as far through as I've got, bro.
Do it, man.
Dude, there's well, for those of you listeners who have more than one brain cell, I guess, if you watch There's a part on there with this. There was this spoiler alert. There's this King Joffrey. He's like this really wicked little piece of garbage, and he dies, and he dies in the best possible way. Like, and you're like, yes, you're like so excited that but it's like it's a teenager dying from being poisoned, and he's like ripping his own throat out to stop the poison from going down. You're like, finally, he got it, and like I'm like. Yeah, there's bad people sometimes, and you wish them to get their comeuppance sometimes. You're not sad when somebody gets what's coming to them. So, again, I'm just not sure empathy is always going to save these dudes. It's a bad tactic.
I think especially when it's overemphasized. I would say on the average, most clients I meet with already have horrible self-esteem or self-image. So if they're coming into this thinking they've never meant anything, and then all you're doing is telling them how they've hurt other people, then they're going to be like, yeah, see... I am a piece of crap.
That's a good
Don't get me wrong. I think there's a time and a place for that conversation, but when it's overemphasized, I think you end up really getting the opposite effect that you're looking for.
I mean, you have to have compassion for yourself or care about yourself or in order to even begin to care about what you're putting other people through. And so a lot of these dudes that are entering into treatment already feeling pretty low, asking them, or I guess trying to teach them empathy, I mean, it's short-sighted, which is what Mace brought up, and that it maybe looks good on paper, but in actualization in real life, it doesn't really match up as a very good relapse prevention measure. But also that they're not equipped for it, man. Mm-hmm. Like with what you're saying, you have to care about maybe yourself first before you could even begin to care about other people. And yeah, a lot of these guys aren't there yet. So again, I guess I feel like we can, unless you guys have more to say on it, I feel like we can move into how destructive shame is.
Well, and the thing is, they may never, like Mace was saying, they may never get there. So if I base it off that, then where do I go? But if we go more kind of the route that we do, like, okay, let's just say it is all about you. How is acting on this and going back to prison making you a priority?
That makes way more sense.
It's not.
Yeah. Well, right.
I think a lot of times they'll grab onto that more than they will talking about
Of course. Like, I'm not saying never talk about it, not having empathy for another person is a useful skill, and it's good to have compassion. Just don't count on it. And secondly,
not as a relapse prevention.
No,
right.
no. I think clients get to a certain point, and then, well, especially what you're talking about, if I feel shameful about what I've done, again, if a person doesn't give a crap about themselves, why are they going to care about somebody else? And I'm not. Again, I know they should. I know that's what you should do, but I'm just saying the reality is they just don't. I need to get them, from point A to point B. Empathy-wise, going back to Ted Bundy, dude had a ton of empathy. He was a master at it, really good at it, and he used that to manipulate other people to get what he wanted, and it's obviously really harmful. So part of that is we just got to break through some of this shame stuff. So I don't know, but should we talk about kind of what the difference is between guilt and shame then, so people kind of have an understanding about that?
Yep. So, if I was going to do a quick synopsis, guilt is when you feel bad about something you've done. Shame is when you feel bad about who you are. So guilt, look, guilt can be useful. Guilt it's necessary. It's important to be able to recognize that you screwed up. That feeling, that crappy feeling, that punch in the gut feeling that you get when you feel guilty about, either breaking your own personal value, hurting somebody that you love, maybe in a more general sense, causing damage to society, whatever it is, that punch in the gut feeling can actually be a useful intervention, provided that you like yourself otherwise, beyond that, because, if you have a set of values and in violating those values, you feel some guilt because it doesn't line up with who you like to say that you are as a man or who you try to be, then your behavior is out of accordance with that which you say you value, and you feel like shit about it, and that can serve as a motivator to change some behaviors. Shame, on the other hand, that's a motivation sucker. It's when you don't even feel good about who you are. So that goes back to Justin, what you're saying, dude. Like a client that's feeling shame and they hate themselves. They maybe say things. They tell themselves they're worthless. They're a monster. The types of things that sex offender treatment used to do in the past as a part of curriculum. Then it doesn't lead to any. There's no motivation for positive change because, again, you feel like you're a piece of shit. So why try?
Well, yeah, and that's how I tend to look at the difference. Where shame is just that's it. It's a label, then that's it. There's no forward momentum with that. There's nothing that's going to happen. It just stops there. Where guilt is at least like a direction forward. I view that as like solution oriented. Like I feel guilty for something I did. I want to repair it or I want to avoid it so I don't feel that again. Where shame, it just kind of stops. Like I'm whatever label, and then that's just the end of the equation. That's it. Where guilt is more like I sense that like repair comes from that, or trying to move forward or trying to fix something or trying to resolve something.
Yeah, it's motivating, right? Like, I mean, I think there was I saw some dumb poster or quote or something like that, had like Johnny Depp on there, and he's like, live life with no regrets. I'm like, oh my God. Johnny, you should have regretted a lot of the things you've done, dude. Like buying all those houses, Playboy, and beating your wife. I'm just kidding. Yeah. You should have regretted that movie Transcendence. But I'm sure Johnny Depp's a nice guy. What I'm saying is always like, regrets are good. Regrets are a really good thing for guiding my future behavior, because if I've done something that I feel like, again, violates my value system, that's and it feels like crap, that's good. This is also exactly why shooting the moon, in terms of like, I want you to take more accountability than you actually deserve for this, doesn't compute very well. Because if you, like, I don't know, I guess I try to think about some of the things, like a lot of the accusations that have came out recently against, like celebrities and for sexual this and that and the other. And I'm not like trying to say that, nobody's ever done. I mean, there's a lot of people who've done a lot of horrible stuff, right? But I'm saying, if you're going to tell me that, like trying to buy a girl a drink in a bar that's sexual abuse. Okay. Now you want me to feel guilty about that? That's going to be, I'm not going to ever do that. I'm going to think it's preposterous. I'm going to think what you're trying to sell me is silly. So if you go overboard, on the accountability you're trying to give to me, I'm not going to buy into it. I'm going to think it's silly, and I'm not going to, take it into stride. Now, the other effect is if I start to somehow program that into myself and say I'm convinced myself that I'm a piece of shit, I think you're actually making somebody more dangerous at that point. If somebody is convinced that they're not worth, the ground they're walking on, what would motivate them to stop hurting you or somebody that you care about? What's going to stop them? If they don't have a stake in themselves or care about themselves, why on earth would they care about you?
I think that's an important piece that maybe people don't look at, is that, I'm going to make it sound like we're all selfish, but in a way we are. I mean, people are motivated by, kind of what's in it for me. And again, the what's in it for me might include people I love. What's in it for me might include the things that I value, which can be, nice charitable things, but ultimately it comes down to what I get out of it.
Yeah.
And if I feel like I'm an effective dude, if I feel like I have the ability to get things done, if I have the ability to set a goal and get to it, if I feel like people love me, if I feel like I have a good set of friends around me that have my back or whatever it is, then I can actualize that. If the opposite's true, and I've had it beaten to my head from maybe some life history factors, and then I have a therapist piling on board and further compounding how shitty I feel about myself, where's the motivation to do anything positive? The motivation is going to be to do stuff that feels good right here in the moment, because what's the difference? And those types of things that make us feel good right here in the moment are usually the things that get people into trouble.
Well, that's funny how you said that too, like the selfish side of it, like being selfish in a good way. Going back to guilt, why would I not say something hurtful to someone I care about? Yeah, there's a part of because they'll feel bad. But ultimately, I'll feel bad that they felt bad, because if I didn't care, I would just say it. So in a way, some of that stuff kind of is selfish on a certain level. It's like, I don't want to do that because I don't want to feel bad about it. Like, they'll feel bad too, but I'm going to feel bad that they felt bad. So in some ways, it kind of is a self-serving
the selfish, kind of the way I distinguish between those two, I think there's selfish and self-interest. Selfish, at least I describe this to my clients, as selfish is you benefiting at another person's expense. Okay. So I've got some ice cream and Justin wants some, and I say, nope, you can't have any of my ice cream. Justin goes without ice cream and I get all the ice cream. Okay. So I benefit from Justin not getting ice cream. All right. Self-interest would be like, okay, well, I'm going to give Justin some ice cream today because next time he has some ice cream and I don't have ice cream, I want some of that ice cream. Right. I'm doing that because it's probably a good idea that I'm doing that. Now, not everybody computes it that way. Some people, because the other direction is, I'm just going to do this because I think it's important to share. All right. But now we're talking about a value. Right. We're talking about a value here. No matter what, if you think about the most benevolent people on the history of planet Earth, so you think about like Mother Teresa and Gandhi and the Dalai Lama, everything they ever did was guided on self-interest. And I know that sounds horrible, but it's true. If like Mother Teresa, I think when you're a nun, I know people are going to get mad at me here probably. I think like you're nun, you're kind of married to God, or married to Jesus or whatever. I think that's kind of how it goes. And anyway, you have a calling, you have something that you do here on earth, and that's part of what you're here for, right? Well, that was because it was a set of values, whether they're prescribed through her religion or not. She nevertheless lived up to those values that were important to her, and it was self-interest that guided her motive. Did a lot of people benefit from Mother Teresa? Of course they did. That doesn't make her a selfish person.
Yeah, to be clear, that doesn't diminish anything that she did.
No.
It's just it's an accurate description of the motivation.
If everybody acted in self-interest all the time, the world would be the most peaceful place. We would never have war. Because why would you do those things knowing the consequences of your actions could come back on you? If everybody acted in self-interest, we would never do those things. It doesn't make any sense if you really start to play the tape the whole way through.
Maybe would it be more accurate to say long-term self-interest?
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Sure. I mean, if you're just wrapped up in short-term gratification, gratification is in self-interest, but I think
potentially selfish though, potentially.
Sure. The long-term stuff is hard because it's like watching water boil.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really, the long-term stuff, the biggest reward essentially that you're going to get is hitting a point where you can look back and say, look at all that I've accomplished. That's an amazing feeling. I've been able to do that before for myself. I mean, I'm not really anything special, but I'm kind of proud of what I've been able to accomplish. But that's about as good as it's going to get. There's never going to be a time along the way where it's like as gratifying as something as that is instant, that is really harmful to other people at the same time.
Sorry, did you have something?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say something I was going to bring up. This might be a good way to jump off on that. Is all right. So a typical, I guess, maxim or statement that we often hear clients say, and even encourage them to say, is that I am not a sex offender. I'm somebody that committed a sex offense. I mean, it's people say that to the point of cliche now. But, the idea being that a sex offender is somebody that actively sexually offends. A sex offense, is a behavior that was committed. But if you're not if you're just a human being, you're a person that did this behavior, but that doesn't currently define who you are. But I've been a little more cautious lately in encouraging that idea. And again, I 100% agree with it. But there's a lot of times when a person has made genuine change. It's like, all right, the dude that committed this sex offense, 7 years ago is a very different person than this man that sits in front of me today in my office. Like, I can tell because his lifestyle is different here, and here. He's made these changes. I can hear through the way he speaks and represents himself that he thinks differently about things. He can genuinely say that he is not a sex offender. He's somebody that committed a sex offense. There's a lot of people, I think a lot of clients that get into the program that hear that and it feels good and it sounds good, but they haven't done the legwork yet to actually change. Like, maybe they're not actively committing a sex offense right then and there, but a few questions deep into a session with them, I can pretty quickly see that they're still, shifting blame for some things. They're lying and deceiving. They're, kind of telling you again what you want to hear. You can tell that their interactions with other people in their life are manipulative. Their job, their employment's unstable, like all these different things. And I feel like to be able to truly say that you've changed, it has to show up behaviorally in some other ways, because I don't even know if a client believes it themselves. If a client hasn't made genuine change, tangible things that they can look back on, behaviors that they've modified, ways of thinking that they used to think this way, now they think this new way, they know their words are hollow as well. They know that it's just a statement. They know that it's just, I'm not a sex offender. I'm someone that committed a sex offense. Like, well, shit, prove it, bro. Like, what have you done? How are you different? Show me how you think differently. And I think once clients are able to demonstrate that, it feels genuine to them because it's actually real and it's not just some banal platitude that we just blurt out in therapy because it feels good. So I guess I 100% agree with it still, but I've been a little more reserved, a little more, I guess, judicious in actually pushing that on to guys kind of new into treatment.
Yeah, the biggest thing about that is, I think for clinicians, is stop trying to control language in your group. Like, let it be organic. I mean, you can't be talking about inappropriate stuff and, not having any good conversations. What I'm saying is that if you're having a group and a client calls, so like for an example, right? If in the past it's been a person says my victim, right? Versus the person I victimized. Okay, I understand the difference between those two statements. But if I just tell you the person I victimized and I tell you the rationale behind it, whether or not you're actually going to believe that is really hard to measure. You're just telling me what I told you to say so you don't get in trouble. So language change over times in terms of my responses and behaviorally in therapy is really important, because if I notice some guy says certain things and I bring those up in a non-judgmental and non-confrontational way and just say, well, yeah, let's play that out. Like, let's say you maintain that way of thinking, and let's see what feelings that evokes, what behaviors that lead to, and what are the likely consequences. Okay, now let's reel it back. What's a more balanced way of thinking about this? What are the feelings that's going to evoke? What are the behaviors? What are the consequences to that? And now I've planted a little bit of a seed. Now, 3 months later, I might see some change in their language. They start to think differently. They start to speak differently, and there's my change. And of course, that should translate into their behaviors theoretically if they're taking it seriously. But if I never give them the opportunity to organically tell me where they are by the language that they use, then how would I ever measure that? How would I measure any progress other than you're just turning in assignments? I've got to have some other measurement. So that's important too. I mean, just shaming them into saying, you got to say this, that, and that, I just don't think that's very helpful.
Man, the only way that we can truly assess if these guys are thinking different about things is based on just the stuff that comes up in conversation. You can tell if somebody thinks about the world or how they think about themselves or how they think about their relationship with people by the way they describe things and their day-to-day interactions. You can tell a lot about how somebody operates just hearing them maybe talk about their work, and their relationship with their boss and coworkers and what they bring up. And if their speech is controlled because we have this weird idea of these words are banned, these words are good to go, we never see that.
Well, yeah, the one thing, and I want to hear what you guys have to say on this. There was just I won't share the details, but what I will say is that there were some changes in kind of how behaviors were recorded and documented, and I guess sanctions were given out at one of our inpatient facilities, right? And a lot of so this was by the correctional staff, right? And I think clients make a huge mistake here. Like, why are they expecting correctional staff to be therapists? Like, you know what I mean? Act like they're like they're. Well, the thing is, like, correctional staff and police officers should act like police officers. Like, that's what their job is.
Different jobs,
and it's security based. Like, the thing is I'm never ever going to think that the way that they do, because I just don't think in that mind. It's not a bad way of thinking. Like, an example I always use is when an officer told me one time about not leaving a bag of I had like Cheetos or something. Well, I didn't have Cheetos, but there was Cheetos in the trash can, and he asked me if those were mine. I said no. He said, you can't leave those in here, and I was like, well, what are they gonna do? Cut me with a bag of Cheetos? And he said, well, flip that open. He showed me how the inside is silver, right? The inside of the bag is silver. And he said, so what happens is they replace their razors with a little piece of that. And it looks like they have a razor when they've turned that into a weapon. Now, my mind never would have gone there. So part of this is I have to suspend the fact that I just don't know certain things. And I have to take into account that they know how to do their job. But if you guys noticed the way that they responded, some clients are just like, yeah, man, it sucks, but this is just something that we all got to get used to and get over, and it's not that big of a deal. Mm-hmm. Here's how it's going to go. And others were like, this is the end of the world. Well, the clients who are now telling me that this little shift in how they do things, which, by the way, folks, was not astronomical, this little shift in how they administer things and this little minor rule changes in how they do this, were now showing me that you have zero problem-solving skills, your emotional management is horrible, and what you've been telling me, I have to question what you've been telling me so far in treatment, because this should be easy for you to handle and wrap your mind around. I'm no criminal mastermind, but I think being able to adapt to this system is really easy, and some clients totally fell apart about it and we're super mad, and the other clients kind of like that's not that big of a deal. Mm-hmm. We can get around it. I don't know. Did you guys notice kind of the same thing?
Yeah, it was almost like there was no middle ground. People just either rolled with it. It was like, it is what it is, or it was like a total freak out.
Well, as a therapist, I remember feeling impressed with some of my clients that took it in stride and just like, well, yeah, kind of sucks, but whatever. It's all good. I'm doing what I need to do in this program, and I'll adjust. I'll make it happen. I'll get out of here. Like, and again, these guys, it seemed very real. And like, to me, that's evidence of problem solving. That's evidence of emotion management. That's evidence of not being, an impulsive, whatever, as opposed to people that, again, have the appearance of doing well. Again, guys that might be well-spoken and be adept at using these templated responses of how you're supposed to say, but watching them lose it and, start grieving all, everybody and talking about how the system's against them and how it's all about this and, kind of going that conspiratorial route that a lot of these dudes go down. Like, less than impressed, man. Like, you're not showing me much as far as managing your world. And so when you get out of here, it's like, your frustration tolerance sucks, dude.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've been way more impressed with the guys that just sort of roll with it. I've had a chance to turn it into, there's been 2 consecutive groups now where, the topic that we teach in the CBISO curriculum, just found a way to adapt it to their adaptation to these rule changes. And a lot of them pick right up on it. They get it. And that's what we're looking for. I'd way rather, feel good about seeing how this guy handles this new rule change and watching him adapt on the fly than listening to him, or I guess listening to him throw out some, Justin, you did a pretty good imitation of like the typical client speak or the therapy speak. I really wanted to just learn about my red flags and the high risk situations that led to my assault cycle through the pretend normal phase of the justification of like, what? Dude, shut up.
What does that mean? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm reading the 4 promises.
I don't know, but am I done yet? Or?
Yeah.
I don't know. I read Ender's Game, though.
Yeah.
Well, I think it goes back to like you were saying earlier, Jeff. Like, you can definitely tell the difference between someone who says, "Yeah, I'm not a sex offender. I committed a sex offense at one point," and someone who's just regurgitating that. Because I think that, like you were saying, if someone has that as their go-to statement, recorrecting that in group, I think people just coming in, or they'll say that, but they don't even know what that really means. They don't understand the separation until they've gotten further into treatment. So when you just start to throw that out there for the hell of it, it has no weight to it.
And potentially, well, I was going to say it removes the impetus for change. I doubt that statement by itself would, but I mean, in a way, if
could be a way to justify.
It seems like it, right? I mean, the whole idea is behavioral change, and there's a lot of dudes in our groups, especially guys that have been there, done that in therapy, that have done the legwork to make themselves different. And they're typically the group leaders. They're typically the ones that'll say such a statement. And so the new guys coming in that haven't done the work on actually modifying the way they respond to their world might hear that, take it and run with it without having to, maybe after they leave group, going home and thinking like, well, shit, what do I need to change? What do I need to work on? Because they already can just let themselves out of the hook by saying, well, I'm not a sex offender. I just committed a sex offense, And yeah, like you said, justification maybe.
But going back to where we were talking about some of the rule changes and people, like you said, their frustration tolerance, like that's the route I try to go with it. And it's like, okay, I get, there's petty rules and you have to live with it, and that's really difficult. I'm not downplaying that. But petty rules are going to exist in every aspect of your life for the rest of your life, whether it's work, your landlord in a relationship. You're always going to have these. Is your go-to just going to be freaking out every time and just until you get your way? Like, you're going to be a very lonely person. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I try to learn. I'm like, if you can manage this, problem solve, think ahead a little bit. If you can get through this, how much easier is your probation or your parole going to be if you work on your frustration tolerance, focusing on the things you can control as opposed to just getting mad about everything you don't like? Because there's an endless supply of that. If that's what we want to focus on.
Well, the difference is I just don't think it computes that way in our own minds or other people's minds. Like, think about if you've ever worked at a place of employment and So one of the things that they really dislike our clients is this idea of this mass punishment, right? So one guy does one thing wrong, and then as a matter of an executive rule change, now everybody is affected by this. Okay, well, doesn't that happen at any place of employment? Somebody does something incredibly stupid, and then that changes policy for everybody there moving forward. But people don't look at this as like punishment. It's a hurdle that makes life more difficult, like, oh, Jim, leaving his used condoms in the garbage, or whatever it is. Now we all can't have our own garbage cans, or I don't know what.
What?
I know.
But that's true. Well, probably like,
I'm not going to tell you where I've worked before.
I wonder what percentage of just laws in general are because some people messed up, so the rest of us have to follow certain laws that probably would never be an issue for us otherwise.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So yeah, I mean, that's 100%. What about all the warning labels on things? No, but yeah, seriously. You brought up that, landlords, employers, probation officers, when they hit the streets, like there's gonna be shit they don't like come up, and so again, their ability to adapt to this now does translate to then. I mean, I know that's an exact repetition of what you just said, but I think we have to do that with our clients sometimes, is legitimately connect the dots for them.
Well, and I think there's also a disconnect where sometimes the thinking gets so black and white that it's. If you even have the conversation with me about this, it means you also have to like the rule and totally agree with it. It's like, no, I'm not saying that at all. You can totally think this is the dumbest thing ever, but let's problem solve how.
Exactly.
I look at it this way: like, no matter what that rule's in place, you're not going to change it. So you can either have the rule and be totally miserable and dig yourself a hole, or you can have the rule and learn to roll with it and move on. So like, either way, the rule is going to be there. Mm. Why make it worse for you and anyone that cares about you or any family members that want to see you get out just because you don't like the rule?
And a lot of the guys get that.
Oh yeah,
they're rolling with it.
Know when to make a stand. Like, I mean, am I going to make a stand because I didn't squeegee the shower after I got out? I mean, like, I'm not. I mean, that doesn't sound really super important. If it was something this was legitimately a violation of my rights or something like that, I might make a stand for that. But that's a hard stand, man, and you better be willing to, go through some. I'm not going to say punishment, just some hard times as a result of that. I mean, it's just tough because I would just say that. Don't get me wrong, I think they deserve to be upset for a second, and then they get to kind of wrap their minds around it. That's the whole point of those groups and everything, is kind of getting them to that point. But again, I think, when you're looking at that and saying, okay, well, how do I work around this? Now, and I'm not saying manipulate. They're not. I think I want to know how to problem solve. I want to see some good problem solving among these guys, because I mean, it's just weird. I mean, the idea of this whole working through shame and stuff like that, going back to kind of how you were starting this was, well, if we just make them feel so horrible about themselves, then they won't do this again. And if you really just take a minute to think about that, that doesn't add up. Like, the idea that every one of these guys were at the top of their game, living life to the fullest, that's when they committed their sex offense. It's exactly the opposite. I mean, they were at a point where they didn't really care much about themselves or anybody else, and life didn't really matter from one day to the next as to what happened. And so it made sense to them. Again, I mean, if you want to have true empathy for this, is try to think about what set of circumstances would a sexual offense make sense to you. And I get maybe some people might not be able to wrap their minds around that, right? And I still struggle with that. Like, when would that make sense? I don't know. I don't know what set of events or history or mindset that's going to lead to, but it exists because they did that. So, I mean, it's counterintuitive that we're trying to say, well, no, we want these guys to be invested in their lives. We want these guys to be digging their lives because they have hurt people, and those people are never going to forgive them in some cases, and they get to do that. They get to make that decision. And I'm not saying you get to be, cool with sex offenders. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the one thing that's going to stop them from committing another offense or recidivating is that if they value what's going on in their life right now such that they don't want to destroy it. And that is, if you're guiding that by guilt, they're less likely to do those things. So reinforcing this shame stuff just doesn't fit. And rules and all the rest of it, I mean, we just need to teach them to adapt. They're much stronger. They feel better when they are able to adapt to those rules. They're proud of themselves.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's part of it, and I know we've talked about this off the podcast, but when people will come into group or they'll come into an individual session complaining about a new rule or something like that, if my first thing is to shut them down, some of the classic statements like, well, if you don't like that, you shouldn't have come, that kind of thing. But that goes more of like the shame kind of thing. Like, yeah, if you weren't a piece of shit, you wouldn't have to follow this rule. They're not going to leave that session and be like, oh, man, he's so right. I really need to start following the rules.
Damn, I never thought of it.
Or if I spend 20 minutes with the guy, like, oh, dude, that does freaking suck. Yeah, like losing your phone call, dude, that probably sucks to not talk to your family. Like, yeah, I'd be frustrated about that rule too. Like, actually see kind of the human side of it and then talk to them through it. Kind of show them, like, yeah, you are human too. Like, that would suck to go through that. Like, even if it is self-imposed, it still means it sucks.
Well, to that point, one of the very first assignments that we have these guys do in the curriculum is actively acknowledging that resistance to treatment's pretty normal. And we tell our therapists, like, hey, actually sit down with the client, help them fill out the form, acknowledge that there's going to be some resistance to treatment. And that a lot of times shuts down that resistance. And then Mace, one thing I wanted to come back to. So you were kind of talking about the thought experiment of trying to imagine what set of circumstances would have to be present in order to commit a sex offense. You're talking about having empathy for them. And again, I think a lot of people bristle at that idea because there's still this idea that to have empathy for somebody also means that to some degree you're endorsing what's happening, because with understanding comes endorsing it. And I know that's not what you're saying to do.
Right.
So I wanted to emphasize that because, again, I think it's useful for the listeners, for, if you're a therapist listening to this, do that. Do the work. It's uncomfortable. It's, and again, it's not saying that you're going to do it or whatever, but imagining what your life would have to be like and what the set of circumstances would have to be to violate consent to get your sexual needs met is, well, if nothing else, if it's hard for you to imagine exactly what would have to be the case, you can probably at least try to understand, like, well, would you be in a happy place in your life, or would you be in a pretty down and depressed state of your life? Even if just starting there, like, which is more likely? I think most people will land on, no, things would have to be cataclysmically wrong with everything that I have going for me right now. And, there's outliers. There's people that have committed a sex offense when, all things considered, it seems like things were going okay. But, man, those are the exception.
I don't think the type of approaches we're talking about are going to help with those guys either in a lot of ways. I mean, yeah, again, I'm not... And when I say have empathy, I'm not saying like start having sexual fantasies about kids or anything like that. Don't. What I'm saying is try to imagine a world in which that made sense, because what we're taking into consideration is that at one point or another in our clients' lives, it made sense for them to commit a sexual offense. So I think they struggle with it too. I think they look back on it and they're like, I don't even know how I made sense with this. And that's what the whole clarifying values exercise is about, because so what we essentially do is we give them a list of values, but we also want them to value things too. And a value is just something that you find important in your life, right?
Well, one thing that I've noticed that happens, sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
One of the assignments that we have to explain to people if they aren't familiar with it, so we get into one where it explores life history factors and lifestyle factors, where life history factors are things that I've done or things that have happened to me in the past that I cannot change that maybe played a role in my offending. Mm-hmm. And I even have a fair amount of clients that don't like doing that one because they felt like, well, it wasn't anyone else's fault. It was my fault. I chose. Mm-hmm. And you have to kind of explain to them, like, yeah, I agree. You got to own your actions, but it's also okay to open the door to say, hey, what kind of things did I maybe go through that happened to me that I didn't deserve or ask for that played a role? And I think sometimes therapists fear going down that road too, because it's like, oh, I'm going to justify what happened. Well, is that bad? That's not necessarily a bad thing. You're helping them understand that, yes, you made a choice and that is on you, but it's also okay to look at what kind of things happened that steered me in that direction that made that choice easier.
I like the word influence. These factors didn't cause you to do this, but they might have influenced you. And so that seems to help them bypass that natural hurdle you're talking about, to where, because again, sometimes clients don't even need us to do that for them. They're hesitant to even like today I was running a group, and the guy had committed a sex offense while he was drunk, and he was bringing up his offense as a part of a story that he was telling, but multiple times he kept like falling all over himself to make sure that we knew that he wasn't blaming alcohol for his offense, like to the point that it was getting in the way of his story. It's like, dude, I got it. Yeah, you're owning it. And I kind of sold him on that idea too. I was like, look, man, you can at least acknowledge that the alcohol had an influence on your decision making while still simultaneously owning your decision. That seemed to, I mean, again, it's just a word change, semantic strap mace, but it kind of helped him at least be like, okay, yeah, all right, it influenced me.
No, if you're using semantics to kind of explain something, I'm saying don't limit the conversation that the client's going to have. I just wanted to be organic. But I mean, I think what you were saying, Justin's like, is really important. I mean, yeah, we all had bad shit happen to us in our lives. I mean, that's life, right? The difference is they made decisions after those things happened that became kind of lifestyle factors that were part of this. So whatever recipe a client gives me as to what's happened in their history, there's another person out there that's gone through that same thing and they lead perfectly happy lives right now. There's no guarantee or like recipe for a sex offender. There's no such thing. It's I think you focus on, yes, I can't control those awful things that do happen to me. I can control how I respond to them, right? And that's going to be a lot of, again, kind of what the value stuff is because the exercise, I think, in a lot of ways, and this is helpful for if anybody were doing this, like if you were talking about a substance abuse person, somebody who committed a crime, or if you were a therapist and you said, okay, well, this is what I have to imagine. We kind of give them a list of, it's like, I think there's like 50 different values that are on that thing, right? There's a ton.
There's a lot.
And then we force them to rank them in their top 10. And one of the things that they always say is they're like, man, all these are important. Every one of these. And I say, well, yeah. So I'm going to force you to rank your top 10 on these, right? Which is like, 10. I want you to label them, right? Just label 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10. Then I want you to tell me what the top 4 are. Well, no, those are my top 10. I know, but I want to hear the 4 most important things that there were in there. So then you take a sexual offense and say, look, at one point or another in your life, your sexual offense superseded every one of those. Now, again, that's where I have to say, I can't imagine a circumstance where all those things would be superseded by a sex offense, but there was a circumstance that existed out there. That's what we're trying to acknowledge. And the idea there is okay, with each one of these elements, it might be a trickle effect. It's not like a flood. Sometimes it's a trickle effect onto each one of these values, and I feel the guilt, and that's reinforcing the shame. So we're saying as time goes on, look, if one of these values, if you're not living up to this value, pay attention to that. That's super important. If you're living all these values, how on earth could you commit a sex offense? This is a relapse prevention plan in and of itself. If I have this value system that's put into place and I know when I'm violating that, if I say, I got to get back on track, you are much less likely to commit a sex offense if you're doing those things. That's kind of the practice we're saying. That's the importance of having those values. So same thing when we talk about, I know some clients get wrapped up in this because there was a guy who had gone to Sexaholics Anonymous, and he was talking about some of the values that were bestowed on him from there, and he's talking about higher power, and of course, all the clients like roll their eyes and everything. I'm like, well, think about what a value is. Like, I mean, where do these values come from? I mean, do you think, I'm not saying that they came down from God. What I'm saying is we can all agree that these things are important. Isn't that, I mean, these are just things that are way more important than us. These are just things that are important because they're important. Why are they important? Who said they're important? Well, we did. That's, if anything's a higher power, you can say my value system is my higher power. It's going to guide what I do moving forward. I don't need to say this is a God. I just have a value system. Religion's helpful because it prescribes a value set to you, but I don't need it. I can define it for myself, and it's as meaningful if I choose for it to be.
That's a nice fill-in for people that don't believe in God. I don't think I'd considered a value system as being, at least in the sense of what we talk about at the higher power thing in treatment with the AA model. Yeah, I mean, isn't the idea of a higher power is it's supposed to be something bigger than yourself or outside of your own immediate? I forget exactly how it's worked around, but Man, I don't know. Explain that more, dude. I don't think I've ever thought of a value system as being like a potential substitute for the idea of a higher power.
Well, just think about what religion is, right?
Set of values.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
values and
it's a prescribed set of living your life in recognition of this is the way we live our life for this particular, this is how we worship. So it says do these things because they're important, right?
Yeah.
It's just prescribed. And I'm not knocking religions. There's hardly any religion out there that says to do bad things, right? Most of them, if not all of them, have a pretty good message. And if you follow them to a T, you're probably going to be a pretty good dude, right? I'm saying that devoid of that. So if you're choosing to say, well, I'm not religious, okay, that's fine. Nobody's saying don't do that. That doesn't mean now I live a life with no values. Right. You have to. This allows you to predetermine those values. So this is me saying, well, yeah, I like this set of values more than that set of values, and here's what I disagree with. I get to develop for myself. And in that respect, it ought to be more meaningful to you. It should be way more meaningful to you. If you're telling me that religion is something that you don't appreciate, you don't believe in because you disagree with certain elements, okay, fine. Well, write up your own set of values. You're not rewriting a religion. You're just prescribing your own set of values for yourself that are more important for you, that are more meaningful for you. But it's unlikely that those are going to be bad things too. So again, if everybody's kind of operating under that assumption, it's all going to be a good thing. That values and what we find to be important, that's bigger than us. That's way more important than us. I mean, we can all agree on those things. You know, it's probably a good idea that those things are in our lives. And that, I don't know where that comes from. That was just shit we made up along the way, and we said it's important. If that's not more meaningful than just me, then I don't know what a higher power is.
That's actually really good to hear, because there's an idea there that some people have that if you don't have religion, then you don't have a moral basis or a basis for a value system, which is just not accurate. You know, and so again, I think that's pretty good for people that might not necessarily follow a specific religion to see that a value system doesn't have to necessarily come down from on high, and that it can be something based on just kind of almost a humanist mutual self-respect, those, looking out for mankind, all those great things, but really just the things that you value and things that are important to you. And like you said, even at this most simple level, those typically aren't criminal pursuits. They're typically, all the things that, whether or not you have religion, come up when you're discussing values.
Well, right. What's the first commandment? Thou shalt not kill.
Is it?
What about people that wear true religion jeans?
Yeah, now if they wear true religion jeans, then
they're pretty good people, I think.
Their values are those are high value jeans. Like so just think about that for a minute. Thou shalt not kill. I think that's the first commandment, right?
Yeah,
maybe.
Why not?
Maybe.
It's
Who
one
knows?
of them.
Obviously, I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though. What if I just said, it's probably a good idea we don't all kill each other? Can we agree on that?
I like that.
We can all agree on that. But you don't find that in any other animal. Do you find that in bears? Do you think bears, hey, bro,
They eat
you
their
okay
own
with
kids,
not No,
man.
dude, they don't give two shits about each other. So I'm just saying that, and it has to do with how intelligent we are, of course, and we have morals and values that guide our behavior. And I'm saying just respect that. Have a respect for the fact that those exist, and have a respect that when you violate them, that's a big signal that you're violating your value system, and it don't take it lightly. And if you feel guilty about it, awesome. You should feel guilty about that. That's a good thing. You have a conscience, brother. That's good that you feel that way. So, I mean, it has a whole lot more to do with that we can intelligently think abstractly about things that are good for all of us, and that kind of interconnectedness of human beings all together. Yeah, that's good. And if you're getting them on that and following a good value system, they're much better set for success at that point.
Oh, that seems like a good
Wrap
good
it
way to
up,
wrap
son.
up. Yeah.
Wrap it up. Not that, Justin. Put it away.
It's good. I got the sock out.
Yeah. I was talking about his microphone, folks.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay. Until next week.
Bye.
Wait, next month,
Wait,
year.
Whenever.
See you later.
It's just whenever at this point. Bye.
All right, that is a wrap on this episode of the Guerrilla Social Work Podcast. Thank you for tuning in.
Join us on our next episode as we will have Mr. Edward Cook from Prime Polygraph join us. So I think he will be our first repeat guest. Maybe I'm wrong. But he'll be back on the show with the next episode, and he will talk about some of the changes in the world of polygraphs and also how they are used at the federal level. I think there was a case he was involved in. So he will be on the show, and he will update us on that. Until then, check us out on all the social media websites that we've neglected for like the past 5 business months. And one of these days, we'll get those back up and running. And until then, we will see you on the next episode.